What's up, guys? Welcome to the Put Me In Coach podcast,
where we go beyond the headlines and deep dive everything NFL.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Andy.
Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much. But what do you think about him?
I think that he has now become the most overrated and simultaneously underrated player in the NFL. And it reminds me a lot of when you're talking about Kobe Bryant's career, right? Like, not that Jalen's accomplished what Kobe did, but it's almost this thing of where you have like Laker fans constantly being like, oh, Kobe's the GOAT. And it's like, well, no, he's not the GOAT. So then to swing the pendulum back, you're having people be like, oh, he's not even top 15. It's like, well, no, he's definitely top 15. You know, this is how I feel about Jalen coming into this year, right? It's like you have Eagle fans, especially coming off of the 2022 season, being like, oh, he's like neck and neck with Pat Mahomes, which, you know, if you watch the Super Bowl, he kind of was. And I do agree with you. I think that year he deserved MVP. And I'll be frank, in that game, he was the better quarterback for a majority of it.
Which is crazy, but it's facts.
It's facts. And so coming into 23, it did feel like he was a top 3 quarterback. It felt like he had fully arrived. It felt like, you know, this was another guy who was going to kind of be in that top 4 that you and I always refer to, which is, you know, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, and Lamar. You kind of, one of those guys had to go. And it was, I think, going into the season, especially with the injury in training camp, I think it felt like Burrow was out and Hurts was in, and everybody was kind of running with that train. And then you have a season like you did, and now you're seeing top 10 lists and he's not even on it. And it's like, well, okay, they collapsed down the stretch, but man, they started the season 10-1. Like, they're not, you know what I mean? Like they pooped their own season away. I don't think it's particularly Jalen's fault, but I also think that opposing defensive coordinators kind of figured him out a bit. When kind of doing my research on this and figuring out what happened. One, I think the biggest thing that happened is I think your coach sucks. I think your coach and your quarterback don't like each other. And I think your quarterback is actually a mature human being. And I think your coach is just a rah guy. He doesn't call any plays. He causes a ton of drama. He acts like just a complete buffoon a lot of the time. And I think what we saw last year was an entire team quit on that man. And we'll get to that later. I don't want to spend too much time on the coach right now, but I do think that is the biggest issue of what happened last year. But I also noticed that when I was looking at Jalen's numbers and looking at like, okay, what exactly went wrong with this guy? It seems like opposing defenses figured out that when you blitz him, he becomes kind of a shell of who he normally is. Just looking at last season, his completion percentage against the blitz, 63% opposed to 67. His yards per attempt, 6.9 opposed to 7.4. His touchdown to interception ratio, 9 and 8 opposed to 15 and 7. His scrambles, 15 opposed to 32. His QBR, his 82 opposed to 95.3. That's a big difference. It's a really big difference. And it seems like if defensive schemes can kind of neutralize him and avoid the scramble, he's not able to extend. I mean, it sounds very obvious, right? Like, if he can't scramble, he can't extend plays and he can't make things happen. But that's what they're doing. There's a lot more QB spies. It's a lot more blitzing on him. It's a lot more, okay, we got to focus on him and get him to force either like a check down, a bad throw, or just, get a sack, right? That's the ultimate goal. And I thought it was interesting on passes 20 yards or more when against the blitz, he only completed 30% of those, which, when you add in the fact that he's now has Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator who loves to drop back and throw it deep, as we saw last year with the Chargers, and we saw the years prior with Dak Prescott. I mean, you guys know, right? It might leave a lot to be desired. I'm not saying that him having Kellen Moore is like a detrimental to his game, because I don't think it will be. I think it's actually going to be a better version of what we saw last year, particularly down the stretch. Because I like Jalen Hurts. I think Jalen Hurts is I have no loyalty to Philadelphia. I have no loyalty to the Eagles. I don't really feel any type of way about your team, to be totally honest with you. But I know a franchise quarterback when I see one, and he's a franchise quarterback. He talks to the media. He takes accountability. He seems like an incredibly likable guy. And, the player that I watched in that Super Bowl 2 years ago was one of the most dynamic players I've seen in years. I mean, it was very, very fun to watch, and I was fully pulling for you guys. But yeah, I mean, I think Moore is probably going to dial up some things that get the best out of his game, especially with this offense, and I'll let you cook on that in a second. But I do worry about Jason Kelce not being there anymore. I do worry about, this seemingly defensive scheme being figured out. So I don't know if I'm ready to say that he's going to get back to that 2022 MVP form. I felt like that was kind of a magic in a bottle season. But would it terribly surprise me if you guys did that again? No, not really. But let's move off of Jalen unless you have anything to add on to it.
Yeah,
because I kind of want to hear about these weapons.
Yeah, I'll mix it in. I mean, I will say this. Talking about the offense, I wanted to kind of take what you were talking about, what you just kind of briefly touched on with the Kellen Moore hiring, and kind of use that as a pivot into my next piece of this offense, which does include Jalen.
The motion.
The motion is important.
The motion. I think that's something I forgot to mention. The motion is huge. But tell us.
Yeah,
about
I mean,
it,
you were last in the league in motion last year, which is unacceptable.
Yeah.
You have to be able to add these things and add these wrinkles into the offense. But I think for me, I have two minds about the Kellen Moore hire. Number one, I think that Eagles fans are overreacting a little bit and forgetting the fact that this guy was dismissed from the last two jobs that he had. Great OCs don't get served walking papers. Okay? That's number one.
They go become head coaches.
And that's not happened. I will say this. I think for me, your concern about Jalen Hurts in this offense, I think, is super valid. And I think it's just because Kellen Moore hasn't seen a deep crossing concept that he didn't love. And I think for me, part of the reason, outside of what you didn't mention, and I think is very valid, we talked about it on Jags with Trevor. He was hurt last year. Jalen Hurts was not healthy.
Yeah.
That knee was jacked. He was running around with a knee brace. He looked hobbled for that whole second half of the year. And I think that was part of it. So I think his health coming into this year is going to be a massive sort of determining factor on how good of a season he's going to have. And it sounds like he's doing well at camp. So we pray that he stays healthy. But